Good morning, Cherokee. You're listening to On the Air with Cynthia and Barbara. We are broadcasting live on Radio Cherokee 103.3 FM. Ciento Tres, Punto Tres. We're here in lovely Alto Boquete and a beautiful, beautiful morning. Few pretty little clouds in the sky, but other than that, it's going to be another lovely day, which we've been having lately, thankfully. After all the rain we've been having, it's nice to see.
The switch has been turned from water to sun.
From water to sun and from water to wind. We have an amazing guest today. We have an amazing engineer who I forgot to say good morning to. Good morning, Bolivar.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome.
Our guest today is very interesting, very knowledgeable, Mr. Richard Dietrich. And I am so excited. He is an author, a lecturer, and a longtime Boquete resident with an amazing history of things he's done. Good morning, Richard. Can you hear us?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the show.
Beautiful day.
Let's see. Bolivar, can you turn up the little sound a little for Richard for us? Thank you. Richard?
Yes.
Perfect.
Oh, there you are.
There you are. Okay, now we can hear you fine.
And Richard is my neighbor in Palmyra Centro.
Yes, and Richard, you have an amazing history of, do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about your background?
Yeah. Well, you're breaking up a little bit for me, so, but, welcome to Panama. Sometimes the internet up here is not that great. We've been in Boquete for 16 years. Had a great time. It's been a great adventure. We live on a little farm up in Palmyra. And I'm here with my wife and my 3 dogs, and we're having a great time.
But you started your life as a pastor, is that correct? Or your adult life?
That was very interesting to read, Richard.
I had churches for about 30 years in New York, Colorado, Wisconsin, and California. And then kind of morphed into we had travel agencies in Southern California for a while. And then I got in the .com business for a while, and then got tired of did real estate for a little while, and then got tired of the rat race, and we came to Panama.
And so you are an expert on the history of the Panama Canal.
Yes. And
other things in Panama, but the Panama Canal was kind of your niche expertise, I would say.
Yeah, I've been since. We came here 16 years ago, and about 12 years ago, I started lecturing on ships, started doing the Panama Canal, and so when the big cruise ships would go through the canal, I do the talk from the bridge and tell them what was going on, and that kind of morphed into lecturing on ships in general, and now I've been doing that 12 years, and probably have over 70 trips through the Panama Canal, and I've lectured on 300 ports around the world and done 2 world cruises. So it's been a fun life.
Totally fun.
It's a tough life, but somebody's got to do it, right?
Yeah.
It is, and I tell people it's better than being a greeter at Walmart. Not that there's anything wrong with.
I love to read that. Yeah, that was excellent.
At Walmart, but it's been a good gig.
Yeah, and you've written a few books.
This year has been the pits because I was scheduled for a very busy year. Typically, I'm on ships 4 to 6 months a year, not all at one time, but on and off. And this year was going to be very busy, and I haven't been. Everything's been canceled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you see the cruise ships coming back after there's a vaccine, or do you think they'll be waiting even longer?
No, I think they'll be back. There's a big built-up demand. I think you're going to see. I've done all sizes of ships, great big ships, and about 2 years ago, I started doing small river ships. Did the Columbia Snake River and the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes, and the same little ship we went to Cuba for when that was open and stuff. And I really like the smaller ships better, and I think you're going to see more movement of people away from the big resort ships that are just like a big resort, mega resort that gets lost at sea. I think you're going to see people moving, especially our age and our type people, moving towards smaller ships. They're a lot more personal, more luxurious, and you really can get into the ports and get into places where the big ships can't go.
All right.
I was wondering, after all your wonderful escapades of life, what made you and Nikki choose Panama?
Well, actually, how we got to Panama is an interesting story. I had been on a cruise that was going through the Panama Canal when we had travel agencies, and we stopped in Gatun Lake at a place called the Gatun Lake Yacht Club. Now, there's never been a yacht at that Gatun Lake Yacht Club.
I've been on Gatun Lake. I can't even imagine a yacht club on it.
It's for nothing. It was left over. It was a resort area from the U.S. Canal days. And it's basically where the ships would stop to let people off to go off on tour. And so we stopped there. I was on the Rotterdam. We stopped there. And Nikki, I'm married to Nikki Steele, who is better known in Bocchetti than I am. But so she wanted to go on this authentic Embra Indian tour, and that the ship was offering. And I said, honey, it's going to be some hokey, touristy thing. Not that any cruise line would ever offer a hokey touristy tour. But so she went off on the tour, and I just wanted to get off the ship and say I set foot in Panama. So I got off the ship, and there was a group of Embra Indians there who were selling baskets. And the girls without their tops were posing for pictures with the guys as they got off the ship, and the women getting off the ship all got to pose with a hunky Embra guy in a loincloth, and so it was kind of a hokey ripoff. But
just a little.
the ship had charged $35 for people just to get off the ship.
Jeez.
And I guess they felt guilty or something, but they started offering free beer. And there was a couple of these Embra guys were sitting there, and I went over and got talking to them, which was interesting because I didn't know Spanish, and they only knew a few words of English. But the English they knew because their uncle had worked for the U.S. Army at the Jungle Survival School and had actually taught the first Mercury astronauts how to survive if the capsule landed in the jungle. So they picked up a little English, and we got talking, and since the ship was offering free beer, I started bringing free beer over to my newfound Embra friends, and pretty soon I met all the brothers and the whole family, and so that's how all this thing got started. And when I left, they kept saying, oh, no, we want you to come back and visit the village. We want you to visit the village. So I went back. We were living in Southern California in Ventura. And I went back and began to try and research these Embra people. Well, at that time, there was very little online about the Embra. And but I did stumble on all this stuff about retiring in Panama. So that really is the reason how we got to Panama. And when we came down to Panama just to visit, to see if Panama stayed on our short list of countries we might want to move to, we had visited to Bocchetti and really liked it up here. But we had one night, 2 nights, I guess, in a hotel in Panama City before we went back to California. So I told my wife, I said, I want to go find these guys. And so I left. I found a guy that had a dugout canoe, and he took me up the river to go to my Ambra village, the one where I know the people. You go half an hour across Lake Atalaya and another 45 minutes up Jungle River to this village. And I showed up without them knowing I was coming, stayed overnight with them. And but I remember riding up in the dugout canoe. We had bought a bunch of beer. I knew that they weren't allowed to have beer in the village, and I wasn't sure what's going to be done with all this beer. Well, I found out we were going to drink it on the way up. And I remember laying back in this dugout canoe and watching the trees as we went up the river, watching the trees and the birds and the monkeys, and thinking, man, I can die and go to heaven now. I've done it. This is fantastic. So that really sealed the deal coming to Panama. And we've remained friends with those guys. They've come up and stayed with us in Boquete, and we've been down to visit them, and they're really good friends. But, it's all because of the Emperor Indian.
I love that. I have to ask you, Richard, I was reading on your website, which caught my eye, was the heading 10 Reasons Not to Move to Boquete. I love that. Can you tell us those 10 reasons why you shouldn't move to Boquete?
You're going to ask me to repeat that I
Can you? Well, okay, how about this? How about telling us what made you make that page about 10 reasons not to?
Well, I think that, we have had people come down here who run the land from the law in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And when we were living in Valles Escondido when we first came down, and there was a guy that was running a Ponzi scheme out of his house in Valles Escondido. We didn't know it; nobody knew it. But I think he screwed up. I think he had ordered a bunch of illegal dirty diamonds from Africa, and had them sent in. But he had them sent to his 2-year-old son. That's who was on the address. And that obviously sparked some interest with Panamanian customs, and eventually they nailed the guy. We had, there was a time a while back when I know they picked up somebody who'd been wanted in the U.S. for child molestation. Mm-hmm. So people who come down here and are crooks or want to escape the law should just stay where they're at and not come down. And some people come down and they want to try and turn Boquete into Miami or Chicago or wherever they're from, and that's not why you come to Panama. You come to Panama because you want to live in Panama.
Exactly. Well said.
You want to experience the culture and the people here.
Well said. Thank you.
Yeah. I think there was also an expat down here who was a serial killer, if I'm not mistaken.
He's in prison. Well, he's in jail.
Yeah.
David.
I think he lived in Bocas or something.
He lived here first, and then he went.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but thankfully, and Richard, I'm sure you'll agree with me, that thankfully most of the people that come here are normal, upstanding citizens that come here to enjoy the weather and the community, and don't come here for any illicit reasons.
No, I think people who come here for the right reasons will enjoy it, have a great time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you come just because you think it's cheaper? Well, some things are cheaper here, but not everything's cheaper. You come because you really want to embrace what Panama is as a country and specifically what Boquete is. And Boquete is very different from, say, Panama City is. We all know. So.
Yeah. When people make a general question like, well, how much will it cost me to live in Panama? Or in Boquete, the question is lifestyle. What's the lifestyle you want, and what's the lifestyle you're used to, and what's the lifestyle you want here? Because you can live here on not very much money compared to the States, or you can live here on more money than you spent in the States. It's your decision and your lifestyle choice.
But I do think you can live better here for the same, the
Yes,
same
I
amount
think
of
so.
I agree with that. I agree with that. But again, it's, you can live here on $1,500 a month if you want to, or less even, or you can live here on $15,000 a month if you want to.
I live
Get
in
your own have a jet ready and take you wherever you want. That's about 10 grand, and there are other things you can do with your money if you want. So it is lifestyle and choices.
Yep.
And it's also
But,
being
you know,
willing to
Panama's
live
not
in a new
perfect. There is no
environment.
perfect place in the world. So, if you're looking for perfect, I guess go to heaven. But
Oh dear, not too soon though.
Not today.
That's not something I'm looking forward to in the near future. Maybe in the far future, yes, but not the near future. So, is there one fact about the canal that you think that most people don't really know or understand that's important for us to know, especially living down here?
Well, I think for one of the things that I try when I do this on the big ships, I'll do a series of lectures leading up to Panama Canal Day, and then when we're going through the canal, I'll be up on the bridge telling people what's going on. But I think sometimes people in the U.S. Look at the canal. Yes, the U.S. built the canal, and that was wonderful, but they tend to just look at that period, and what they don't realize is that after the U.S. turned the canal back to Panama, what tremendous things Panama has done with the canal. For example, the canal expansion. The U.S. had started almost very similar type program to what we ended up with in the 1930s. And then World War II came along, and they had to stop the process of that, and then just never had the will or the money or whatever to continue it. Panama came along, not only made it safer and better and more ships, but then created the whole second lane and the new lock. So it's really phenomenal what Panama has done with the Panama Canal since it was turned back to them. And I think that that's something that sometimes as U.S. Americans, we just don't realize, or we tend to want to think that we should get all the credit for this. And it was never, it was always done in U.S. self-interest anyhow, not the interest of Panama.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that they had to build the railroad before they could build the canal.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole history. It's a fascinating history. It really is.
And the number of people who died during the construction of the railroad and the construction of the canal itself is an unbelievable number of people. I mean, you just...
How many people?
Tens of thousands, I believe.
Well, it's generally estimated that it's probably about 26,000, but nobody knows for sure because during the French days, people were dying so fast that many of them didn't even get to the hospital. They weren't reported. Somebody died on the job. They would just roll down the hill into the spoils. And there's a couple of good books. One is Panama Fever, and the other is The Canal Builders. And they're great books about that period of history and what went on. And people really appreciate the canal. You really got to look at some of that stuff.
One of the things that fascinated me in the history is when they were running out of places to bring workers in because people were dying in mass, they brought in a crew from China, and they promised them opium. And then at the time, Panama was still part of Colombia, I believe, and the governor from Colombia came down and said, "Oh, no, you cannot give them opium." and all of the Chinese workers committed suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the questions that I used to always get asked on the big ships is, well, is the canal, is China running the canal? Is it now the Chinese canal? Blah, 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 blah. And I don't know how these crazy things get started, but I used to tell people, no, Panama, it's Panama's canal. Chinese were here before the canal. They built the railroad. We have little China stores in every little community in Panama, and Chinese families have been here for multiple generations. So if you're not Panamanian, you don't work for the Panama Canal. Period. So,
Right. Yeah.
What? How did you get involved in the touring, the cruising industry?
in the cruising business?
Yeah. How did you get involved in that?
Well, when I was in seminary in Holland, Michigan, my senior year, I had an apartment in the basement of a woman who, her family owned the bank, the local bank, and she was a widow, and she had this big house on Lake Macatawa. And every year she went on the world cruise on the Rotterdam, every single year.
Mm-hmm.
So I had an apartment in the basement of this big house to look after things while she was gone. And sometimes when she wasn't out on the Rotterdam cruise around the world, she would sometimes call down and say, "Richard, do you want to come up for dinner?" Well, I was a poor seminary student, and she'd invite me up to dinner, and she'd have these thick-aged steaks, and I mean, that was really living for me. And she'd tell me all about stories of life on the Rotterdam and traveling around the world. And when I graduated, she said, "Richard, on these ships they all have chaplains. And back in that day, every ship had a Protestant, a Catholic, and a Jewish chaplain. Then as ships got more and more greedy, they threw the chaplain overboard and the rabbi overboard. And the last guy to go was the Catholic priest. But in those days, so she said, you had to apply and go as now your minister goes and use your vacation time and go on the ships. So my first church was in the South Bronx, in New York City. At that time, Holland America's corporate office was in New York City. And so I applied, and they sent me back a nice little note that, we have tons of applications, but we'll put your name on the list, and if there's ever an opportunity, we'll call you. So I called them back and said, well, I live up in the Bronx, and I'm single, and, so if you get a cancellation, call me. Well, it turned out they got a lot of cancellations. And so I started using all my vacation time going on ships as chaplain. And then later, as we moved westward, I left the big city church and had those churches in places like Wisconsin and stuff. I would take groups of my people from church on board the ship, and one thing just led to another. And so I spent a lot of time at sea.
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Very interesting. A very serendipitous life, Richard. Very. It's very cool to hear all the connections you made and how you moved through these different experiences and adventures.
I've taken a few cruises, obviously not anything close to 1 week in your life in a cruise, but I've taken a few little cruises here and there. And I remember being on one ship, and they were introducing the staff, and they were introducing the director of entertainment and something else, and they introduced the doctor, and I remember them very clearly saying, and he's had one successful operation on the ship.
Boy.
And all I could think of was, how many did he have that weren't successful?
I know, that sounds suspicious.
Yeah, it does. What would be your favorite?
Usually on ships, they get you off as soon as there's a problem.
Oh, I'm sure. That I know of. But actually, I think that was on the QE2, and it was a crossing back to the States. So
Yeah,
were in
but
the
there,
Q- you
there
were in
is
the
a
QE2?
point when you're doing crossings and stuff. There is a point where you reach what's called the point of no return, and at that point, they cannot get a helicopter out to the ship. So
right.
it has to be taken care of. And sometimes, like an emergency happens next to me or something,
Yeah.
and you're beyond the point of last return, it has to be done.
I took the QE2 from France. I think it was back to New York, and it was at the time when there was an oil embargo, and they didn't use the stabilizers on the ship. Yeah, right. You're laughing, right? So, no matter where you went on the ship, you heard a chorus that you didn't want to hear.
Vomiting.
Exactly, and they had ropes up everywhere for us to hold on to because the ship wasn't very stable.
Oy.
And when I got off the ship, I managed, my stomach was okay, but when I got off the ship, I had an inner ear problem and I couldn't stand for more than 30 seconds without feeling like I was going to fall down. And that lasted,
Scary.
yeah,
How
that
long did it
lasted like
last?
3 weeks straight.
Wow.
Yeah, I was ordered to bed and to even eat my meals in bed and to only get up for one reason only. Yep.
Maybe the problem was that you just weren't drinking anymore.
Maybe that's possible. that's possible. But it was a beautiful ship. But right after that happened, England sent the QE2 full of sailors down to what was the island they fought over? Oh goodness, I can't remember the island now.
Yeah, Fort Stanley, the Falklands.
Right.
That's right.
Well, they sent the ship that I was on, they sent it down there full of soldiers, and I thought to myself, well, you know what, if they didn't use the stabilizers and it gets sunk, I won't be that unhappy.
That was the old QE2, right?
That was the old QE2. I think it was the second QE2, and now I think
Yeah.
they're on the third or the fourth.
Yeah.
Couldn't they
Of
go
all
up
the,
to
of all the
53?
ships I've been on and all kinds of weather, I've never gotten sick. But
Yeah, but I'm sure the stabilizers were working on all the other ships.
stabilizers work some of the time, but a lot of times they can't put the stabilizers out, even if they have them. So
Really?
you just hang on. Yeah.
Wow. That's I don't know. Crossing the ocean without stabilizers is not fun. Just not fun. But it saves a lot of fuel, I guess.
It did save fuel, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so.
What do you highlight when you talk about Panama in terms of Boquete? What are the things that you mention as being highlights of living here?
Well, I'll do lectures. The lectures will mostly focus on the history of Panama and the Panama Canal, and I'll do one usually on the 7 indigenous groups that were here before Columbus. And sometimes, and I'll do one on coffee. If people love my coffee talk. And usually I'll do one on I call it Escape. I call it Don't Stop the Carnival after Herman Wouk's book, but about living in Panama and living here. Tell some of the funny stories and some of the good stories, and some of the bad stories, but people like that too. So.
It's a very adventurous place. I mean, we went to Vietnam last year, and I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, Vietnam is going to be so gorgeous. And you know what? It reminded me, in most places in Vietnam, it looked a lot like Boquete. It even had the same flora and fauna as Boquete.
Yeah.
I find it hard. I've been a lot of places in the world, and I really can't imagine a more beautiful place than Boquete. It's gorgeous.
Well, people always ask me, where's the most beautiful place in the world you've been? And I can name a lot of beautiful places, but I always tell them, well, Boquete, I live there.
Yeah.
And it really is.
I think the beauty here is more of a raw beauty
I
and a
agree.
natural beauty. I mean, Switzerland is so well, it's manicured and beautiful, but to me, the Switzerland, like the Alps, look like someone took a lawnmower to them and made everything so beautiful and even. But Boquete's raw beauty is amazing. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
It's the jungle in all its glory.
that it is. It is. We're gonna stop talking with you a little bit, Richard, because Barbara's got some announcements she would like to make about things going on in Panama or in the Boquete and Cherokee area. We've got some information about Volcan also for our Volcan listeners. Finally got some information about what's going on up there too. So
So just hang on a minute, Richard. I'll be brief.
Okay, no
Tomorrow,
problem.
December 8th, is Mother's Day here in Panama, and also the anniversary of me and my partner coming here to live 6 years ago. And it is a national holiday, really a big, big deal. Which
for
is very
Mother's Day,
cool.
not for you
Mother's-
coming, right?
Well, there's probably a national holiday. Banks, government offices, and many businesses will be closed. And this holiday is similar in tradition to Mother's Day in other countries, with the notable differences that it's a public holiday and it's celebrated intentionally on the same day as the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. Now, that's the way to honor a mother. BCP Tuesday Market announced it has about 6 new vendors. The Tuesday Market at Tap Out in Boulder 54 announced that the beautiful garden walkway between the two buildings will now also have vendors on it. So they've expanded. Operation Feed Estrella was started by a group of gringo friends in 2019. If you were listening last week, you may have heard Shelley and Sarah talking about this endeavor and also about the very cool silent auction they've been having. The online continuation of their fundraising silent auction is continuing now until December 10th, when they will announce the winners on December 11th. And the items that they're offering are unbelievably cool. Really unique, special, amazing things.
Yeah.
So check it out. Operation Feed Estrella is the Facebook page, and you can find all the information there.
If you want to go to the bidding page, you can go to feedestrella.org.
Oh, because on the main page they have a little click on top that says
Right,
auction.
right. But if you go to feedestrella.org, it tells you about the history of Feed Estrella. It tells you, and it has a link to the auction, straight to the auction. It's a
Cool.
good page to go to.
It's very user-friendly. For 8 years, Tierras Altas Recicla has been recycling in Volcan. Every Friday from 9 to 12, a group of friendly volunteers receives, sorts, stores, then sells recyclable materials. Almost all kinds of plastics, metals, paper, and cardboard, and Tetra Pak are recyclable. That is a lot of stuff that doesn't have to go to the dump. The group formed as a legal foundation about a year ago, and along with the municipal government, is making big plans for the future. Hopefully, the Boquete recycling will open again soon. You can check out Tierras Altas Recicla, RECICIA, it might be Recicla,
Recicla.
on their Facebook page. The Boquete Handicap Foundation will be closed to the public from December 14th to the 19th in order to prepare for our Christmas deliveries to our members. They can still continue to receive drop-off donations during that time, but cannot allow any shopping. The foundation is always very happy to have people know that they are open to receive donations as patio sale items, Monday through Friday from 9 to 3. Volunteers continue to sell used books at the Tuesday morning market and Tap Out and receive used computers for repair to sell on the internet.
Yeah, if you're looking for a computer to use for email and just Googling things and whatnot, they sell computers that are very serviceable for that at very reasonable prices. You're talking like Most of them under $200.
Yeah.
Some of them even under 100, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good thing to buy.
Boquete Fotografia is going to be selling photographs by its members at the BCP Tuesday Market. That's the one at Arco Iris. Most of these photos were featured at the Boquete Library and exhibitions by the Boquete Fotografia. So be sure to stop at the table at BCP's Tuesday Market at Arco Iris and learn more about becoming a member of Boquete Fotografia. And finally, this year I got a calendar, and you can too. Amigos de Animales 2021 calendar with all of those beautiful pet shots for purchase at Mike's Global Grill, Sugar and Spice, Isabella's Bakery, The Perfect Pair, Larry's Place, which is where I got mine, and Mailboxes, etc. It's a very well done calendar, excellent, beautiful pictures, and it supports a great organization. So grab one today.
Yeah, I have mine. I bought one. I thought it was a excellent investment,
Absolutely.
especially since one of my photos is in it.
And her photos are awesome.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
I would.
Some of those photos are really amazing in there. They're beautiful and unique and interesting, and everyone can use a calendar, and they make nice gifts. If you're sending
Absolutely.
something back to the States, send them a calendar.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to have and to give.
It is. How are we doing for time? I have no idea right
I
now.
will look, and it is 10:47.
So we have time. Richard, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yay! So, you've written several books.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, one of my neighbors, the laundry room for the area where I live is right next to the door to my casita. And she was walking by and she goes, "Who's on your show tomorrow?" And I said your name. And she said, "Oh, wow, I'm reading his book now." So
That's cool.
she was really excited about it. And she said to me this morning, "Could you find out, would you please ask him how many books he's written and what they are?" So I'm asking on behalf of Gail, how many books have you written and what are the subjects of the books?
Well, I wrote, let's see, there were 3 that were written when I was really active in the pastorate. 2 were for Ideals, which publishes the Ideals magazine. I think they still do, but they were then. One was God Loves You and I Do Too, and then there was one about Norman Vincent Peale, the man in his ministry. I used to have a weekly column in a number of weekly newspapers around the U.S., and that it was called Positive Living in Tough Times. And so I did
That one could be today.
Yeah, it sounds like
a
immediate.
little compilation of those, and then Nikki and I, my wife Nikki Steele and I, we had been active in grief recovery seminars in Wisconsin, and we did a book called How to Recover from Grief. And then I've done different books about the Panama Canal. They've come and they've gone. Each one's been a little bit different, but the one now is Panama Canal Day, and then The New Escape to Panama, which is the book about how we moved here and what our experience was in moving. And I did I did the 21 trips around Cuba, but we could still do that as members of a free nation allowed to travel. That's no longer the case, but when we could go to Cuba, I did one about cruising around Cuba, and then I have one about cruising the Great Lakes. And those 2 were basically oriented to the cruises I was doing there.
Very nice. Did I hear you correctly that you cruised the Columbia River?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm doing now, and we'll be doing hopefully once this COVID thing we get beyond it. There's a cruise line called American Cruise Line, and they have small river boats. Each ship carries about under 200 people, and they have a couple ships that go from on the Columbia River, and that's a wonderful trip.
Do you
Just
that
gorgeous.
I'm going to ask you just does the cruise on the Columbia River ever go out to the Pacific where it meets the Pacific?
No, we'll go from Portland to Clarkson, and or vice versa, from Clarkson to Portland. So
Ah,
it's mainly
Yeah,
on the river.
much nicer because I've been on a fishing boat going out the mouth of the Columbia into the Pacific. And the day after that, we went to a museum, a nautical museum there, and it said that is the most dangerous place ever, and that more ships sink there than any other place. And I said to my friend who took me on that nice little fishing trip, thank you very much for risking my life like that. I remember we got out to the sea, out to the ocean, and we literally had to circle for like 2 hours before we could come back because it was too dangerous to come back in at that time.
Yeah, that's one of the most dangerous spots, and that museum is fascinating because it's all about the Columbia River pilots and the pilots that do that, the entrance and exit, and
Yeah.
they're really brave souls. The pilot boat goes out, and basically the front of the boat is just one big, cushion of mattresses because they literally have to jump into that cushion. It's very dangerous and very exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I seriously was a little aggravated with the person that took me on it. I mean, and I was thankful that we did the museum the day after and not the day before.
But we do Lewis and Clark trips on there, and it's fascinating history. It's just really a great trip.
It is. And the Great Lakes, when you go through it, that's the St. Lawrence Seaway that you use for that?
Yeah, we have a couple versions. One is we'll go from Maine, and then from Portland, Maine, and then go all the way up, all the way through to Toronto.
Wow.
And then there's another itinerary that goes Toronto to Milwaukee, and that's fantastic. It
Yeah.
really is. Great Lakes are wonderful, but they can get rough too.
Oh,
I
yeah.
grew up on Lake Ontario.
And I grew up on Lake Michigan in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I actually remember one year we actually had a tidal wave in on Lake Michigan that went over the outer drive and swept 2 cars into Lake Michigan.
What year was that?
Yep.
I was
Yep.
a little kid then, so it had to
Oh.
be maybe in the 50s.
I do a talk on when we're on Lake Michigan. I do a talk about great shipwrecks of the Great Lakes, and there are some remarkable stories. Yeah.
And of course, Lake Michigan has locks right off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I've cruised through those locks on little
Lake
boats.
Michigan is gorgeous. I love it.
Yeah.
I love living
And you know, the other thing about when we jump back to Columbia River, there are locks all the way up and down that river, and some of those locks you've got a lift of 90 feet. They're really tremendous locks.
Wow.
90 feet.
The only thing about locks is, to me, it's kind of similar to watching paint dry. It takes a long time to get from one height to another height, or to lower the boats, or to raise the water. Yeah. And my understanding is the Panama Canal, which I've never gone through. I guess one day I'm going to do that, but
Oh, you must.
yeah, I know. But doesn't it take like 8 hours from the time you enter the canal till you get to the other side?
But if we're bringing a blue water ship in from it's 51 miles from the beginning of the actual point where the canal begins, and the pilot comes on. And usually with a cruise ship, it's going to take 9 to 11 hours,
Wow.
Wow.
which for me up on the bridge is a long day.
Totally.
Fortunately, I don't have to talk the whole time, but yeah.
And I would
But you
imagine
know
the
what?
ships don't go through at night, do they?
Not, they shouldn't. A cruise ship shouldn't. The ships go I mean, the canal operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, but cruise ships should go through during the day, but they have to pay extra for that. For a typical cruise ship, just the basic reservation, this isn't the toll to go through, but the basic reservation is $25,000 just to reserve a spot.
Wow.
And if you want a daylight spot, you add on another $30,000 to the $25,000 for that daylight transit. And then you, in addition to that, you have to pay the fee and the toll and everything else. So it's pretty expensive.
I had heard somewhere that the toll for some of the cargo ships is like $100,000 for some of them.
Well, on the new locks, going through the new locks, the
bigger and wider lock?
The big LNG ships will pay almost $1 million.
Almost $1 million?
Pardon?
Did you say almost $1 million?
Almost $1 million, yeah.
How
Wow.
many times can they go through that on a regular year? Not
Pardon?
that many.
Oh yeah, believe me, the new locks are. It's cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
So does the new lock also go into Lake Gatun?
Oh yeah. It's the same. For some reason, when they were doing that project, people would talk about a new canal. There never was a new canal. There was just two new sets of locks at either end of the canal that could take the big ships, and then they had to enlarge and deepen the canal and stuff. You know, if you haven't been through, you should at least go down, and there's a ferry boat that'll take you through.
Well, I when I first came to Panama, I decided to be a tourist in Panama City. So I went on a little trip to the Embaro, and we stopped at Monkey Island. But of course we were on a little river which led out to Lake Gatun, and we were in the small boat side where we could be. And then I remember as we were riding or going past some of these huge container ships on Lake Gatun, I remember feeling so tiny and so insignificant compared to them. I mean, we were like a dot in the lake compared to these huge, enormous ships. It's
Really
it's
is
an interesting,
amazing to
yeah.
say. They're so tall and they're so huge.
I mean, if you think of the size of a container, and they're probably 40, 50 containers high, at least, stacked up on these ships.
I don't know how many, but the new ship, the new locks, I think some of the ships going through there, the container ships, I think, are carrying like 2,500 containers.
Wow. That's just amazing.
There are few things in Panama that really operate near perfect. And if you've lived here a while, you realize that there are very few things that are perfect here.
Yeah, well, whenever the electricity goes off or the internet goes down, you're in Panama.
Yeah.
But the Panama Canal is probably the closest one exception. It works flawlessly, I think. So, yeah.
It's also the biggest contributor to Panama's economy, isn't it?
It's one of the contributors. And that's the good thing about Panama's economy. We don't just have the canal. That is big. But, you know, we've got 16% of the world's ships are registered in Panama.
Really?
We've got the Panama Canal. We've got the Colon Free Zone. We've got the whole bunkering and distribution process using the free zone and stuff. So there's so many, we're not a one-horse economy. There's so many things that contribute to make this successful economy.
And we are so thankful as expats for Panama allowing us to come here and enjoy this beautiful country and enjoy everything it has to offer to us. It's not every country opens its arms and says, "Yeah, come on down."
Yeah. And Panama has always, been the crossroads of the world. And Simon Bolivar said that if the world ever had a capital, it would be Panama City, because it just always has been that, even before the Panama Canal. I mean, it has been just geographically a crossroads for the world. So that's one of the things I think that makes living here so neat, that you have all of these cultures, and Panamanian people have all of these influences. You got the indigenous influence, you got Chinese, you got Latin and stuff, and Spanish, and it just all mixes. I think it's why Panamanians are so beautiful and such a neat people.
And
Wonderful.
if you're into birds, we have the largest variety of birds of any place in the world.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
because of their going back and forth from north to south.
So
And-
sort of in the migration line.
Every year since we've had our house up here at the farm, every year we have had Baltimore Orioles come down, and there's one particular tree that they always nest in, and then they always come to my feeder. So I must have the 12th or 13th generation of these Baltimore Orioles, which are here now. I can see them out in my feeder. But,
Richard,
That's cool. You're on
Richard,
someone's
can
agenda.
Barbara bring me to your farm so I can take photos of them?
Oh, it's beautiful. Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful.
Richard, we have so enjoyed talking to you today that we never even played a song, which we usually do, play at least one song, and I think it's time for us to say we're going to be going off the air. So I want to thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful information with us.
So interesting.
And thank you for being part of the show today. And I'm going to sign off on our radio show for this morning. I want to thank you, everybody, for tuning. Pardon me?
it has been fun. And I want you to promise me that you're going to go down and at least get on the ferry boat and go through the Panama Canal.
I will do that
got it.
before I leave Panama.
So you better hurry up, kiddo.
All right. Have a very, very happy holiday season.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Richard, for coming on.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to On the Air with Cynthia and Barbara on Radio Cherokee 103.3 FM. Ciento Tres, Punto Tres. Thank you, Bolivar, for engineering our show today.
Gracias, Bolivar.
Thank you to Radio Cherokee 103.3 for hosting the show. Thank you to Richard Dietrich for sharing so many interesting stories and facts with us this morning. Remember, when you go out, to wear a mask. Don't hug any strangers. In fact, don't hug anyone. Wash your hands often and keep yourself and your community safe. We're seeing light at the end of the tunnel with COVID, so let's not be cavalier, and let's try and keep everyone safe until everyone gets a vaccine who wants it. On Friday, you can listen to Al Stefanelli's broadcast from 10 to 11, and then at noon on Friday, it's Mike Weber's wonderful Strange Brew Music, which is rebroadcast today at noon. And Dr. Shannon Tour, Talking with Your Doctor, on Saturday mornings from 10 to 11, and, she likes you to send in questions, and she'll answer them for you. Remember to help keep your community clean by adding a little more exercise to your daily walks. Bend down and pick up that litter you see. Join Basura Busters on Sunday morning at 8 in front of the sandwich shop. Thank you, everyone, for listening to On the Air with Cynthia and Barbara. Have a safe, healthy, and wonderful week. We'll be on the air next Monday,
You betcha.
and we're looking forward to talking to you with everyone then.
See you soon.
Ciao.
Ciao.